So, as you all very well know, the ancient art music of Azerbaijan is closely related to the great and equally ancient tradition of Indian raga, and there are many musicologists who have convinced me that the relationship is not casual, but there's much cause and effect, that there's been exchanges over the centuries, especially in North India, which, as everyone who knows the history, there was an exchange of ideas during the rule of the Safavids over the part of India we now call North India. So apparently the ancient Safavid culture had some exchange with the ideas with India, and I believe it was to the benefit of both Azerbaijani Mugham and as well as the idea of North Indian raga. And for those of you who are familiar with this art form of North Indian raga, they always begin an opening of all their ragas with a meter-free section called alap. And the Azerbaijani Mugham tradition, very similar to alap, is completely meter-free. There's no rhythm, there's no overt repetitive rhythm. There's an internal rhythm, of course, but it's not an overt steady beat that you can follow with a drum, for example. And that's how the all ragas are opened with an alap. Some musicians, it's very brief, and some musicians, they're very bold and experimental and inventive and creative, and they can stretch an alap for quite a long time. Azerbaijani Mugham is intended to be a vocal tradition, and the instruments are, generally speaking, seen as the supportive instrument, the instruments for the voice. However, there's also a parallel tradition we have that uses the musical instruments by themselves. And in those cases, the performance of the Mugham is relatively brief, 10, 15 minutes at the most, even shorter sometimes, because it all has to do with how improvisational the musician wishes to be. That determines how long the Mugham will take place using the instrument. The three instruments that we will demonstrate today are all stringed instruments, and the first one is the Azerbaijani tar. I'm not sure how much you see of this instrument. Let me sit back, maybe that's better. Anyway, so I'm trying to hold the pegboard. You can see the pegs. There's 9 pegs, and this is the body of the instrument. You can see the shape that it has, and apparently many centuries ago, apparently in Central Asia, it was first discovered that a double chamber has more resonant power for the same size or even smaller than one single big chamber. So they were able to get an instrument so small and so light it can actually sit. We play it up here on the chest. It's easy to hold, and it produces a big sound. We hear that how rich the tonality is for such a small instrument. It's owing to the nature of the acoustics of the double chamber. And of course, the shape of it is quite important. So you can see by the shape of this. These are not, as you well know with your own instruments, these are not arbitrary aesthetics. These are real acoustical principles at work, and also the ergonomics of how a human being is able to play an instrument. So, for one of the examples I like to cite is, it's difficult to see this, but the neck has a profile which is exactly the profile of the human hand in this space here. So when the neck rests, it perfectly fits that shape. It's got a taper to it. The neck is thin, and it gets gradually thicker as it joins the body. And that's so that we can create this resonance. So in order to prepare first-time listeners to listening to the art of Mugham, and of course, I would like to think that you're not first-time listeners, even if you've never actually heard Azerbaijani Mugham before, you, of course, are a very special audience for me. The very vast majority of...
Not all our friends, it would be better to...
The vast majority of my programs take place in American and Canadian and European universities, obviously English-speaking audiences. Although I've presented this music many, many times in Azerbaijan, that's a milieu that I don't have to go into a lot of explanations. Everyone's familiar. So here we have a very unique situation for me, which is I'm going to demonstrate Azerbaijani Mugham to an audience of people who are familiar with Asian music, Eastern music in general. So you have a great advantage. You have a long history of similar music. Still, I think it'll be interesting for some of you if you'll allow me to go through my demonstration. It only takes 5, maybe 10 minutes. And what I'm going to do is, before I actually play Mugham music itself, I'm going to demonstrate for you the specific psychological effects of notes being played one after another, and allow everyone to register inside themselves what the effect of this progression of notes takes place inside, what our own response is. And it's quite a universal response. And permit me to demonstrate, begin that demonstration now. The first thing I like to call attention to is the phenomenon of the special musical interval we call the octave, because all of our instruments are tuned to the octave, and the octave is very, very important to Eastern music in general. And so I would just wish to call attention, just briefly in the beginning, to the specific effect of the interval we call the octave. And as a child, when I was first exposed to music, I became very, very absorbed in the phenomenon of the octave, which was a problem because I wasn't interested in doing my practicing or my lessons. I just wanted to listen to the octave. And even to this day, after many decades, it's to me an astonishing phenomenon that is worthy of our attention. That here we have a very strange paradox, because it feels like the same note, yet it's different. And I even ask, maybe it's a little bit philosophical, I ask myself, what world is this we're living in that such a thing, such a phenomenon, that the octave is possible? And of course, not just the octave, but all the intervals. Right, everyone's familiar with Do, Sol, Do, Fa. And so we have these array of intervals. The octave. And this, to me, is an extraordinary thing. It's not something that we should gloss over too quickly, but we should savor the extraordinary paradox that two notes can be, at the same time, different, and yet somehow feel the same. And that's the octave interval. And the octave interval, of course, we know is the most consonant. It's the king of consonants. Compared to the octave, all intervals have some, even a small amount, but some dissonance to them. One of the most resonantly harmonious intervals, they call in musicology the perfect fifth, which is represented by Do, Sol. A beautiful interval, very open, very rich, but there's a tiny bit of dissonance in there for those who have the ability to hear that. In any case, it's not the octave. And we marvel at the effect that it has internally. Now, part of the problem, as I understand it, is in our language, we do not have the vocabulary to describe what it feels like to be touched by an interval. We have the famous syllables in the West, do, re, mi, and in India, sa, mi, ga. So we have names for some, and only in the West only for the major scale intervals only. We don't even have syllables for the minor scale intervals. Can you imagine? So we lack a vocabulary to communicate amongst ourselves with the specific emotional sensation of, for example, the octave, the perfect fifth, perfect fourth. So when we hear the major third, for example, do, mi, right, that's the major third, and what a great difference we feel when we change that slightly to the minor third. It's a radical world apart. So I just wanted to start. I know everyone in your university is educated to music, and I don't want to be inappropriate, but I did want to show you how I do my lecture demonstrations to true first-time listeners, how to prepare their thoughts, their feelings, how to get them to settle down inside themselves, to be receptive as first-time listeners to this unusual music. Now, I want to demonstrate a peculiar effect that I've discovered when I was investigating the structure behind the music of Mugham. And I'm going to use the major scale because it is very clear and simple to demonstrate, which is what I call the mystical sense of transport. That music has the power to make us feel as if we've been taken from one place to another. And when we hear the octave note, we have this very palpable, very strong, sharp, and clear sense of finality, of closure, of having arrived, as if we begin here and we end here. And we have that palpable sense that we've arrived, and of course, what is that sense of arrival? It's what I call harmonious resolution. That when you go through a series of notes, and we call it staircase composition, one note sequentially after another, going either up or down the scale, and we have this sensation of having been taken from and through and arrive. We have this sense of arrival. And this is a mystery. There is no common scientific explanation for why human beings will respond to a sequence of notes in that specific way, this mystical sense of transport. And to prove, if anyone needs proof, I'm going to delay that last note. Please, the important thing is to register what it feels like when you hear. And it creates in us the desire to hear. And now we feel we've arrived, we've completed. Now, what is that, please? Please join me in my mystification. It's a marvelous and amazing thing that music has the power to make us wish to hear a specific note that we're anticipating. And the same thing happens going down the scale. Right, that deep, palpable sense of arrival, closure, and harmonious resolution. And while I'm at it, I also want to mention that, as I said, we don't have the vocabulary to describe this simple difference between a major interval and a minor interval. But the idea in Mugham is that the structure of the melodies is specifically designed to make us willing to postpone harmonious resolution. So I call Mugham the art of postponement of harmonious resolution. And so how do we do that? I mean, of course, if I just, play this and then stop playing, that's not music, that's just annoying, right? Everybody wants to hear that. So can you imagine, by the way, when I give this lecture to the music students, like real, they're real musicians, they're graduates in the music program, and I'll play that last note, and I'll say, bye-bye, and they get upset. Please, Mr. Werbock, play that. But it's there to demonstrate the power of music, to make us wish to hear a specific note that we're anticipating hearing. So what we do to make Mugham interesting and listenable is we postpone the note of harmonious resolution by convoluting the melodic line. We sculpt the line so that it agreeably postpones. It doesn't create annoyance. It's to intrigue the listener. So to demonstrate that, for example, so what did I do? I did exactly the same thing. I delayed playing that octave note, but this time, instead of just, delaying the note, I put some convolutions into the melody to create the sense of intrigue, that the listener is willing. So let me begin to demonstrate now one Azerbaijani Mugham. It's actually in two different modes, one going up and one going down the scale. And while you're listening, see if it's possible to keep that feeling, the flavor of what I just demonstrated, which is the mystery of the octave, the mystical sense of transport going up and down the scale in staircase composition, and the idea of the art of postponing harmonious resolution. How artful can one be? So the idea is to create a continuous sequence of tonalities which are all the time suggesting a particular note will be next, but then it isn't. It's some other note, or maybe it's a pause that you didn't expect. And so that sets up a new dynamic and a new expectation that once again has to be played with for a successful, artful postponement of harmonious resolution. Now we have time for questions. If anybody, we can open the discussion to everyone who wants to add any thinking or observations, any questions. Please, now is the good time.
Can you hear her?
Not so well. Let me see if I can turn the volume up. 1 second. Ah, yes.
मैं पूछना चाहती हूँ कि आपके इंस्ट्रूमेंट में जो मटेरियल यूज हुआ है, जैसे जो मटेरियल यूज हुआ है, जैसे उसका तुम्बा या एक ही उससे बना हुआ है या अलग अलग उससे बना के जोड़े हैं?
Yeah, she was asked about your instrument. That instrument is made for the single wood or the pieces in the pieces. What material you have used for this instrument?
There's two different woods involved. From here to here, I don't know if you can see my hand. Can you see where I'm holding
Yeah,
it?
we can see very well.
This is all one piece of carved mulberry wood. In Persian, they call this wood tut. Perhaps in your language also you recognize tut. It's a small berry-like fruit.
We used to call it shatut in our India.
There you go. It's probably from that Persian word. So from this point here to the end is one block of wood. Then afterwards, the neck and the pegs are made from Asian walnut.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I mention the name of the instrument? It's called tar. Yes,
Thank you,
which is a Persian word, of course, and it means strings. Anything that has strings, they call it tar. So in Persia, they have the word setar, which means 3 strings or 3 courses. And I'm assuming that sitar probably comes from the Persian. C is 30 in Persian, so I don't know if you have 30 strings on the sitar, but you have a lot. So that's probably why it got its name sitar.
Yeah. One of our colleague, Mr. Vinayak, wants to ask you some questions.
Yes, please.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Just want to ask you that as we have movable frets on sitar, so do you have the same thing, the same pattern of the fret on your instrument?
Yes, and the frets, of course, originally they were made of animal material. Now it's plastic, like fishing line, some kind of nylon probably, and it's wrapped multiple times. I don't know if you can see the...
Yes, I can see it.
Okay.
I can see it.
Okay. Now, if you take a look at the positions of the frets, they're irregular, not like a guitar, for example. I've seen that on the sitar where the frets are slightly, they're all movable. And of course, the way the sitar functions, you can pull the string to any pitch you want. And that introduces the idea we call microtonality, which is the range of pitches between the harmonious note intervals. So, for example, between the do, the first, the tonic of the scale, and the next note would be the minor second. There's actually quite a range there, and so what the ancient people discovered was that by deliberately positioning the frets, or I have other instruments I will show you later that have no frets at all, like a violin or like a sarangi, we can position, or sarod, we can put our finger wherever we please. So the question is, why do we position it on a note that is not perfectly harmonious? Why would we do that? And I think the answer, at least for me certainly, is we create deliberate dissonances to intensify our desire for harmonious closure. And in the same way, if I may demonstrate this wonderful mystery, the paradox of major and minor intervals, the major interval and then the minor one, right? There's such a huge difference in the way they make us feel. And so because this music is monophonic modal music, right? It's not polyphonic harmony. We do not use chords. And Indian raga is very similar in this respect, that all of the richness, the musical richness, must be invested in the melody. So that's why we like to go deep into the dissonance of deliberate microtonality. This is the key word, is that we deliberately choose a non-harmonious interval. For the same reason that we would choose to use a minor interval, which creates this specific yearning for harmonious resolution, microtones are like a deeper version of minor, the quality that minor intervals have. So, for example, look at the huge difference in the feeling between, that's the major second, and the minor second. It's like two different worlds. So in between, we have this note, and it sounds, oh, that's a off-sounding note. Why would you play that? We don't play it too much, because that's like putting too much spice in your food. There's a limit. You want your food to be delicious and rich with flavors. By the way, I have to make a confession. Indian food is our favorite food in this household. We at least once a week we go to the best food in the world. So thank you so much for that. We have to pay our respects for that.
One more question.
Pardon me?
Okay, after you, sir.
So what's important here, and this gentleman who asked about the frets, the position of the frets, and are they movable? Yes, they are movable, and we position them. Now, some tar musicians, they put more frets on their instrument right now, the standard traditional Azerbaijani tar has 17 frets per octave, which is 5 more than the normal, like you think of 12 semitones in an octave, as per the piano, as per the guitar. But this has 17, and none of them align with the guitar notes. They're all either slightly flat or slightly sharp or radically so. And for that, we get, for example, in that last piece of music, we have this sequence of notes. Right? Now we have, I don't know if you can see this. I hope you follow what I'm doing. These are what we call microtones, and we touch on them because they make, just very much like minor intervals, make us wish for harmony. Microtones make us wish even harder. We wish so much, but we listen to that microtone, and because we know the musician is deliberately, consciously choosing to play a non-harmonious interval, that there must be a reason for it. So we listen, why is that? Why are they playing that note so sharp, or why is it so deeply flat? And the answer has to do with to intensify our yearning for harmony. That's the purpose of it. It's the same as the purpose for minor intervals. Why play minor intervals? Why is not everything major scale? Because we love the yearning that the minor scale produces, in this indescribable yearning. What are we yearning for? Well, for harmonious resolution, of course. Yes? So let me demonstrate some microtones on the next instrument. Unless someone has a question at this time.
One more question.
Yes, please.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
I would like to ask you, which instrument do you find similar to your instrument, that is tar? Which instrument is the closest to it? And this is what I wanted to ask.
Yes. When you say which instrument is closest to the tar, is that right?
Yes, sir, that's what my question is.
Now, what world do we choose from? And what world of instruments? East or west?
From east to west.
Yeah, from west or east, whatever. I would like to know which is the closest.
Well, it's a great question. I think that in the Western instruments, of course, this mostly resembles the guitar, because the guitar also has the double chamber with the narrow connection between two larger chambers. Now, the story goes, and this is something I've heard for many, many years, and I've heard other ethnomusicologists. Where did the guitar come from? And I don't know if you are familiar with this, but what I heard was that the people of Rajastan had taken a pilgrimage to see the burning mountain in the Caucasus, because they have a place there where the fire never goes out. The gas deposits underground, they're coming up from below. They percolate through the porous rock, and a fire was lit thousands of years ago, and it's still burning. And people who are fire worshippers from all over the world, I believe you must have heard of the Parsis. Yes? They originally came from Iran. They came to India because they were persecuted. There's a huge community of Parsis now in India. And apparently the legend of the burning mountain so affected the people of all of South Asia that some made the pilgrimage to see it. And according to some of these ethnographers and musicologists, that they continued on their path into Europe all the way to Andalusia, where they live in the south of Spain, and they continue their extraordinary musical tradition of the world's most complex rhythmic patterns, which come from Rajasthan. You know this, of course. You have these incredibly, the wooden clappers. When I first witnessed this, it was unbelievable. And of course, the musicians came from Rajasthan. Ever since then, I've always been interested, and maybe we say, hopefully, God willing, I will come to meet you face to face, everyone, and be a part of your life in Rajasthan, because it's.
So we are
Thank you.
waiting for you, and we will read.
Hopefully next year. Yeah, this year is a little difficult. Too much international travel this year, but hopefully you'll have another seminar, and we will continue that. So, the legend is that they saw the Persian tar, which was in the Caucasus as well. It's not exactly the same as the Azerbaijani tar, but this tar was derived from the Persian tar design. They saw the Persian tar design. It's very complicated, and it has an animal membrane on the face, just like sarod, where the bridge is resting on a skin. The tar is very much like that. The bridge rests on an animal skin, and of course, that has problems. The change in the humidity, the change in the temperature, and the bridge goes up and down, and it creates headaches for us to tune it and to make it sound well. So they changed it. They put a piece of wood on the face, and they invented the guitar. So to answer her question best, I believe that in the Western tradition, the closest thing to the tar, of course, is the guitar. And they even speculate that the name guitar is a contraction of gitano tar, and gitano is the Spanish word for the people of Rajasthan who came to Europe and are now the people of Andalusia, playing the great musical tradition of flamenco. So that ties those two worlds together very nicely. Now, to answer the question about the position of the frets, I want to demonstrate a fretless instrument. This instrument is a Turkish oud, and the Turkish oud has its origins in the Arabic oud, and the Arabic oud has its origins in the Persian barbat. So this is actually part of the. See how the camera is. You can see this, and again, it's got 11 pegs for 11 strings, so it's 5 courses of doubles and 1 bass. Now let me check to see if it's in tune, please. Is there any further questions, please? How is the sound for the people in the back of the room? Even for everyone in the back? Can you hear everyone in the back in the high levels? Yes? Hello. You can hear? Yes? You have some questions for me?
One question from my side, sir.
Please.
What is Mugham for you when you started learning, and what is Mugham for today as now? Has the subject matter of the Mugham you perform evolved over time, and what influences have affected you in this evolution?
That's a very interesting question. What Mugham is for me is something I believe which is very similar to what you call meditation. It's using the unique power of music to bring about a transformation of human consciousness. Apparently, the original purpose for our conscious mind is to be aware of our environment and each other so that we can live for safety, for survival. That's the original purpose of consciousness, and even animals have it. They're conscious of their environment. They have to make a map in their heads, and consciousness is the tool of mapping the world for successful navigation. And it turns out that humans have discovered that we can do marvelous things with our consciousness that have nothing to do with our survival as bodily animal beings. That we can arrive at transcendent states of consciousness through various means, and one of the means is the use of musical intervals. So for me, when I was a young man, a teenager really, and wanting to be a composer of music, I was interested in examples of music that had an effect on my consciousness. And it wasn't until I was, I suppose I was about 16 years old, when I first heard the sound of the sitar from India. And it was thanks to the famous musician George Harrison and his association with the also famous Ravi Shankar that brought to the Western consciousness the idea of transcendent music. Is my words clear for you? Okay. So when I first heard Azerbaijani Mugham, I was very attracted to the power the music had for transforming my consciousness into a transcendent state of mind. And so that's what Mugham is and has always been for me personally. Now, what it is for other people, of course, you'd have to ask them, what is Mugham for you? I can only tell you what it is for me. For me, it's meditation. It's a way of focusing the mind on a transcendent quality of consciousness. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And it's done through what I call the artful postponement of harmonious resolution, where it takes you through this, the hills and valleys of the contours of musical scales, the effects of the intervals, which are quite powerful if you let them, and they transport you to another realm. And so for the time that you're spending listening to this transcendent music, be it Azerbaijani Mugham, or Pakistani Qawwali music, or Indian Raga, or any one of a number of great traditions from the East, during the time when you're actually listening to this music, you're in a different state of mind. You have left behind all your worldly concerns. We're not thinking about the future, about our troubles, about the problems with our family, our neighbors, our friends. All these thoughts, they seem to evaporate under the force of this transcendent music, and we are transported to this other world which is for some of us, for me, and I hope for you, that this other world is just as real as, the hard material world that we're all familiar with. We agree that this is a real world. Well, that's a real world too, and it has equal reality, equal validity in some people's minds. And for me, music is the bridge from the difficult reality, the hard reality, to this transcendent, beautiful reality. And that's why I play the music. And I think the second part of your question was about the influences. I heard the word influences, yes? Were you specifically referring to musical influences on myself personally as a musician? I don't want to be mistaken here. Help me understand your question a little better.
Yeah, I repeat it again.
Yes, please.
Has the subject matter of the Mugham you perform evolved over the time? What influences have affected you in this?
Listening to all music of the world, not just Azerbaijani Mugham, and of all the music other than Mugham that I listen to, of course, is North Indian Raga. It's also my favorite music. I do not play it, but I probably listen to that even more than Mugham, because when I want to hear Mugham, I sit down and play it. Yes? When I want to hear Muhammedin Dagar, he's playing on the Veena. You know how great this is. By the way, I should mention to you, this is quite interesting. My most recent trip to Azerbaijan was 2 months ago. And I met with some musicians there, and some of them are quite powerful, excellent musicians, and young, half my age. And I was talking to them, and I said, by the way, have you ever listened to Indian Raga? And immediately he says, yes, I listened to Ravi Shankar. I said, well, let me tell you about some others. They have many great masters of music in India, and they're all worthy to be listened to. So I'm actually helping to enlighten the Azerbaijani people about the great musical tradition from India, and that's why it's a interesting honor that you asked me to please show Azerbaijani Mugham to the people of India. So what I'd like to demonstrate next is this instrument is called kamancha, and it's played with a bow. This is the bow. It's not like a violin bow. A violin, of course, you position here and you play like this, right? This is positioned vertically. I'm not sure how. Let's see if I sit back, you'll see more. Yes. With the help of my Everything all right? Please let us open this to discussions.
Yeah, one more question for my friend that what kind of instrument we use for the rhythm in this music?
For the rhythm, we have several instruments. Just one moment, I'll show you. I have one right here. I'm not professional on this, but a typical rhythm it would be a syncopated six. Of course, we have very fast rhythms. And then we have very slow ones like. That's a slow 3. So this is, by the way, it's a in American measure, it's 14. I don't know what that is in a meter. It's a half a meter approximately. A little bit. Let's see, 14, 28. No, it's less than half a meter. I don't know how to tell you, but you can see the how it fits in the hand like this. It's quite nicely designed, and the singers will use it as a resonator. When they'll sing into the instrument, and it answers back. It gives a resonance. I don't know if your microphone can pick up the great echo that this is producing. The singers use this to sing into them. So when the rhythmic, of course, the rhythmic interludes in Azerbaijani Mugham are relatively simple constructions. They are not complicated. From the perspective of the music, the classic music of India, the rhythmic portions that they use as restful interludes in between the non-metered portions of Mugham are intended to be simple. They're like taking a little break, like a vacation from the intensity of the Mugham. They slip into some simple rhythmic pattern. They do that after they've rested, and they go back to that ferocious intensity of Mugham. Would you like to see another instrument, another drum?
Definitely. Please.
Is there time for that? One moment, please.
Yeah, please.
I'm sure everyone is familiar with this, with the goblet drum, and it's. So we have this drum which you can make talk. Right.
What do you name it?
Sorry?
Name?
The name of this is tombak. Tombak, and this instrument is called gaval. Yes, please. Any questions? It'd be a great honor to answer your questions. Or I can just play some more music for you if you wish.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Everybody is so excited over here that everybody wants to come to Azerbaijan to enjoy your music.
Well, if you want to enjoy my music, you have to come to New Jersey.
Okay, sir, my question is has Mugham has any connection with Arabic or Persian Muqam? And if the connection is there, are there series of different Mughams? And those Mughams have different set of notes similar to ragas? That is my question.
That's a complex question. The answer in general is yes. That the word in Arabic, maqam, which means a space, a room, a place. And it also has a second meaning, which is a psychological state of mind, which is also like a place or a space. And they call that maqam. And the Persians, they pronounce it magham. And the Azerbaijanis, they pronounce it Mugham. Okay? So from the Arabic maqam to the Persian magham to the Azerbaijani Mugham, it's a very connected, related tradition. The closest to Azerbaijani Mugham, I think, is the Iraqi maqam. Now the Persian magham, and it's kind of paradoxical because all of the names of the Azerbaijani Mughams, these are Persian language names. But we need to bear in mind that at the same time that the Persian Empire was ruling over North India, they ruled over all the Turkic-speaking tribes in that part of the world. But the irony is that the rulers of the so-called Persian Empire were Azerbaijani Safavids. The architect who built the Taj Mahal was a Turkic-speaking man from Shiraz. All right? So during the Safavid dynasty of the so-called Persian Empire, it was ruled by Azerbaijani Turkic-speaking people. But they also spoke the Persian language. And they spoke the Persian language because they regarded it as a language of great beauty. And the Safavids were very, very supportive of the classical arts, especially poetry and music. And it was just the tradition of the times that all the poets would write in the Persian language, including the Azerbaijanis, who spoke a different language. Azerbaijani is a Turkic language, not a Persian, not the language they call Farsi. So all of the names of Azerbaijani Mughams, they happen to have Persian names, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Azerbaijani Mugham is some kind of variant of Persian Magham. But they are all related. They are all related. Arabic Maqam, Persian Magham, Azerbaijani Mugham, plus you have the Islamic call to prayer. They call it azan or adhan. And you know, if you have Muslim friends or neighbors, or if you've ever been near a mosque, you hear the call to prayer 5 times a day. This music was also a part of this region, and that was that strange meter-free, open-ended type of music. And also another influence, and again, we don't know cause and effect exactly, which came first, but the ancient Hebrews that lived in Iraq, Iran, and the Caucasus, and they still to this day in their temples of worship, the Jewish people of Iraq and Iran, they are singing the Hebrew cantorial, and it's almost identical in the structure to Azerbaijani Mugham. Now, we don't know which came first, and it's an academic issue. The important thing for the musician is to keep the ears open to all styles of music and hear what is related and what is distinctive. The balance between the connection and the joyfulness of the variations that all the different cultures. For example, you have Qawwali music in Pakistan. Afghani music is also it's all related. It's all part of a family. In fact, there are musicologists that want to relate all of the monophonic modal music all the way from West North Africa, Morocco, all the way to Indonesia, and it's all of North Africa, Middle East, Turkey, Caucasus, Central Asia, South Asia, all the way to Indonesia. What binds these musical cultures together? There's a common concept that they share, and then of course there's the incredible diversity. So that's the important part, and I think it also partly addresses your question about the influences on my music, because well, I had a unique situation, which I'm an American, and I'm not Azerbaijani, but I'm devoted to their art form. And the moment I decided to share my knowledge with my fellow Westerners about my love for the Eastern cultures through the Azerbaijani music demonstrations, I understood I had a big obligation, which was to play authentically. The most important thing for me at the time, I must sound like an Azerbaijani, not an American trying to sound like an Azerbaijani. I had to sound exactly. And because of that, I had to go through a long and rigorous training in the classical form of Mugham that is taught in the specialized music schools. And so I studied that with a young master for years. And once that got completely incorporated, and I was able to replicate it with no problem, then I began to listen to other styles of music. And what attracted my musical ear, and I think it's partly because my beginnings was as a composer. I was actually not, I never thought of myself as a musician. I always thought of myself as a composer. But I gave up composition in order to study Mugham, because I was told it was an art form that was under threat. It was, the old traditions, the young people are not paying enough attention, and it was a great cultural richness that I wanted to participate and be like a conservationist, to preserve this music for future generations. Then later, as my musical capabilities increased and I understood the deeper aspect of Mugham, and I heard all the different versions of it, I began to produce what I call a synthesis of styles. I had 3 teachers on the tar and 3 teachers on kamancha, and I taught myself the Turkish oud, to play Azerbaijani Mugham on Turkish oud. And it was actually the playing of the oud that opened up the world of improvisational possibilities. So now I will listen to Azerbaijani musicians play Mugham on any instrument, including Western instruments, like saxophone, for example. There's a few Azerbaijani musicians that play the saxophone, a Western instrument, but they play it so perfectly, so beautifully. And what I like about especially the wind instruments, they don't play them in the way that string musicians, you know how string musicians, they like to play very, very fast. And that's fine. It's wonderful. But I'm not interested in high-speed finger technique. It has no meaning for me as a musician. I love the depth. I like to be taken deep into this world. And for that, you must play slow. And so the saxophone player, he would play so slow, it was almost like he was lazy, He would take such a long time to play this little phrase, and he would and I would listen to it 1,000 times, and he would always trick me where he's going with the melody. The intricate, beautiful artistic rendering, artistic postponement of harmonious resolution. So paradoxically, I'm a Western man who was obsessed with sounding authentic. It was actually this saxophone player that opened me to this world of improvisational possibilities. So when I'm slowing down in the speed of playing, that's from the saxophonist influence. When I'm playing fast, that's because that's how I was taught. Play fast. And I would say, but why? It's Mugham. You just slow down. So even to this day, I go to Azerbaijan, and of course you can imagine Azerbaijan is very welcoming to me because I'm from America and I support and promote their culture in the Western world. And they always arrange. I will have a concert, and frequently it's at the music conservatory, and I always say, "Slow down, my friends, so we can hear. Don't drown me in. I know you can. I know you can do it. I can do it too. I can do that. Anybody can do that. You can train anyone to play fast, but with the whole purpose of this great Oriental music tradition is the depth of it, the power to transform consciousness. So that's why it's of course everyone has a right to play whatever they wish, however they wish to play. And I support everyone who wishes to play music. But for me, I think you probably noticed as I'm playing, it was actually the slow sections that I had to hold on to myself not to get too carried away. That's the big challenge, by the way, when playing, is to you want to go off to that wonderful mystical world, but you have to stay grounded in the present moment. Otherwise, you'll forget which Mugham am I playing. I forgot. Or where in the Mugham am I? You have to keep your mind clear. And sometimes I get a question from my audiences. They say, "What's going on in your mind, Mr. Werbock, when you're playing?" And I say, you have to have two minds. One is to be like the audience member and go where the music carries. The other mind is you have to be present and stay rooted in yourself, or you're lost. You don't know where to go. Yes. Anybody else want to ask a question, please?
Thank you very much.
Do we have time for any more music, or my time is finished?
Definitely. You take your time. Yeah.
Is it up? Would you like to hear one more piece of music?
Yeah, please.
Okay. All right, let's change the tuning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mugham.
I sincerely hope that you enjoyed this
You
presentation.
feel corrected. It's the music for meditation and to feel.
Thank you.
Quite related to Indian music also.
Thank you. Peace be with you, everyone.
So really, you took us to the different world.
Next year, God willing.
You will be glad to know that Professor Ragini Trivedi ji and Professor Rajiv Trivedi ji is among with us.
Yes, I see.
Please come.
Hello, my dear friends. It's so good to see you. I'm sure everyone knows Ragini Trivedi is a great Vishatravina player.
Yes. Yesterday night.
Absolutely entrancing.
We really enjoyed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sir. Once again,